Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Nadia Haddad.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice lunch break. Welcome also to those who just joined us or following us online. So my name is Nadia Haddad. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the European Network of Independent Living, and I'm here representing the European Disability Forum. We want to thank the organizers for inviting us today to moderate this session. So the European Disability Forum is composed by the national councils of different European countries, of DPOs, and also we are composed of the European non-governmental organization who do the defending of the rights of persons with disability. So the session of this afternoon has a very clear objective, and that is how to outline or to clarify what is needed in terms of capacity at national and grassroots levels to achieve a real effective CRPD implementation at all levels. We will provide some examples of how to follow up on commitments that can be easily translated in various national contexts, and much more. But before we start, we also want to highlight that accessibility in all its forms is a crucial precondition to full inclusion and participation of persons with disability, particularly when it's about capacity building initiative. So it's not only about built environment or the used languages, but also it's about accessible information, equipment, personalized assistance and support, and access to all aspects of mainstream life involving the removal of barriers caused by systems, practices, and attitudes which prevent disabled people from participation equal as all others citizens, regardless the type of disability they have. So I'm really pleased to introduce you to very interesting speakers. The first person that I want to introduce to you is Mr. Mika Kontiainen. He is the Director of the Disability at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFID, in Australia, and his team manages Australian global disability partnerships and provide DFID with policy advice on technical assistance on disability, which is a cross-cutting priority for the Australians' international engagement on development, humanitarian assistance, and human rights. So my question to you, Mika, is, since you are speaking on behalf of the Australian government, can you please provide a donor perspective on the importance of supporting DPOs, capacity building, and how, as an example, Australia is doing this?
Thank you, Nadia, and it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon on behalf of the Australian government. As you mentioned, Nadia, disability is a cross-cutting priority for Australia's international engagement in human rights, development assistance, and humanitarian action. Consistent with this, Australia's Development for All disability strategy commits us to strengthening disability inclusion in development throughout the Australian aid program by including people with disabilities as participants in and beneficiaries of all our development efforts on an equal basis with others. We've had this commitment since at least 2010 out of a conviction that a disability inclusive approach is necessary to achieve development effectiveness. Put simply, we cannot achieve the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals to leave no one behind if we do not address the needs of and uphold the rights of people with disabilities. Central to Australia's approach on disability inclusion is supporting developing country disabled people's organisations to build their capacity so that they can give voice to people with disabilities at all levels and contribute as leaders and decision makers in their communities. Much of the support that we provide is provided indirectly, delivered by carefully chosen strategic partners who are effective at building DPO capacity through grants, through training, technical assistance or policy support. These partners at the moment are the International Disability Alliance, the Pacific Disability Forum, the Disability Rights Advocacy Fund, the International Foundation of Electoral Systems, and CBM Australia. All these partners receive DFAT funding, which enables them to support DPOs at international, regional, national and community levels. For example, DFAT funding to IDA supports participants of DPOs at international events like this summit, and hence contributes to making DPOs more effective advocates. DFAT also supports DPO capacity building through direct engagement with DPOs. We have a monitoring and evaluation framework for the Australian aid program, which we use to track the effectiveness of our aid investments. And it includes 2 proxy measures to determine how successfully we are including people with disabilities in all our development efforts. The first of these proxy measures assesses how well aid investments include people with disabilities and their representative organisations in the design, implementation and monitoring of the investment. The second assesses how well we identify and overcome barriers to participation. The requirement to annually report against these proxies encourages our program managers to seek out and talk to DPOs, and through this meaningful engagement contributes to their capacity to engage with governments and with other donors. A final example of capacity building that I would like to mention is the disability inclusive development training that we provide to our own staff in developing countries. This training is delivered not just by consultants, but importantly in partnership with local DPOs. This approach has become an effective model of mutual capacity building. It provides our staff with direct insights into the lived experience of people with disabilities. It establishes ongoing relationships between our missions and local DPOs, and it helps make the trainers more effective as advocates. Moreover, it's a real example of the application of the principle of nothing about us without us. I hope that these very brief examples that I've actually provided are of interest and relevance to the forum participants, and if you'd like to know more, please see me after the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's good to involve DPOs from the beginning, also in the monitoring process. So my next speaker is Mr. Pratima Gurung. She is a faculty member of Padma Kanya College and an activist to ensure the rights of Indigenous persons with disability. She serves as the General Secretary for Indigenous Persons with Disability Global Network. She's also the current president of the National Indigenous Disabled Women Association from Nepal, and she's an advisory member of the Disability Advocacy Right Fund. So my question to you, Pratima, is can you please tell us about a specific initiative you have undertaken in Nepal to build the capacity of individuals most unreached or marginalized about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for the organizer for providing me this opportunity to speak on the behalf of Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network and National Indigenous Disabled Women Association of Nepal. I work for Indigenous women with disabilities, the most marginalized and underrepresented group among the disability, Indigenous, and women movement. By saying this, I realize and I acknowledge that we have several identities as a women, being an Indigenous and being a women with disabilities, and also from a poor and socioeconomic background and from a developing countries like Nepal. So in this context, this situates like me as an Indigenous women with disabilities into the most marginalized and vulnerable group. Having said this, however, I would like to highlight that we are not only vulnerable and risks all the time, but we are change maker and contributor to our family, society, and for the implementations on the CRPD at the ground level. So we have approached and we have developed the strategies to work on the ground. Basically, I would like to highlight 3 strategies for building the capacity and implementing the CRPD to reach the most vulnerable. The first is about the intersectional approach. Our identity as Indigenous women with disabilities matter a lot for us. So we understand the issue of being a person with disabilities, being a woman, and being an Indigenous woman. So when we see all these identities, we see the connections, we see the link, and we see the intersections of our identities, which is a great strength for us. So the second is, within these intersections, we also have the collaborations with the women movement, with the Indigenous movement, and the disability movement. And we value our diversity. For us, diversity is a strength, but most often, our values, our diversity is misunderstood as a fragmentation and a barrier in our movement. But in fact, for us, it is the world of connection. It is the world of mediation for us. So we have been connecting with all these movements. Third, we are also trying to bridge the gap, working in cross-movement collaborations, and we impact our knowledge, what Indigenous and cultural perspective means when we look from a disability movement. And when it goes to Indigenous movement, we see what disability-sensitive approach are. By saying all this, we also try to sensitize our issues and the challenges that we face on the ground, and also figure out some of the gap that we have within the grassroots label, and also building that grassroots label experience at the global label to do our advocacy and lobby, to sensitize the issue of Indigenous persons with disabilities, and to highlight the most marginalized group, so that we feel that we are left no one behind. But despite these contributions, our journey that we feel is just a beginning. And sometimes with these multiple identities, we find that we are nowhere. There is lack of understanding within us. There is lack of minimal resources for funding on intersectional issues, and there is lack of looking at the holistic approach. So we hope to build, and we believe that we have to reach no one behind. So to reach all these layers of challenges that we face on the ground, we know that we have to continue our journey. And because the change has to begin from us and by us and within our movement. And sometimes we have to look beyond our movement. So it is time for us to build our capacity and strengthen the marginalized voices like Indigenous women with disabilities, understand the values, listen to the voiceless voices, and frame those voices to bring and to adopt in the policies and programs that we have been doing at the ground. We build our collective strength and solidarity among all the stakeholders, and we would like to join hands together with the government, with the donor agencies, and also with all our DPOs, brothers and sisters, and beyond the whole society to implement the CRPD on the ground, realizing that nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pratima, for sharing with us that despite all the barriers that you are facing, that you still keep diversity as one of the biggest targets. And let's hope that maybe those gaps and those barriers can be overreached in the near future. Our next speaker is Mr. Hector Minto. He is the Senior Technology Evangelist on Accessibility for Microsoft. Hector worked in the field of assistive technology, alternative communication, and special education needs for more than 20 years, focusing on emerging technology and how to maximize its effectiveness across the wide range of people with physical, learning, and sensorial disability. So my question to you, can you please give us an example of an initiative that Microsoft has undertaken at the local or regional level to build the capacity of key stakeholders to advance the CRPD implementation? And also, how do you think the private sector can be an important partner in the realization and realizing the commitments made during this summit and the Charter for Change in the near future. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you so much for giving me some time in your busy schedule today. I think it's interesting to start with my journey with technology, and certainly with disability technology. For over 20 years, I've been the specialist in the room coming in to show somebody who'd never seen a piece of specialist technology how tech could change their lives, somebody living with a disability. And the equipment was always expensive, and for every company that I ever worked for in 20 years, we sold to America, Germany, Sweden, the UK, and every well-funded country when it comes to disability. We did not develop products for people with disabilities in what we would term emerging markets, because the cost of sale was too high on equipment that was already too high. And so 2 years ago, I decided to join Microsoft because I could see the investment that we were making, because the role of technology has changed. Technology is reaching further across the world. Technology is reaching further into societies every day. Governments are pushing us online. The services that we're expected to survive are all going to be delivered technically or digitally. And it was so clear to everyone at Microsoft that if we were going to do this and deliver this dream, we had to do it with people with disabilities. So my job at Microsoft when I joined is not just to show what we're doing externally, to engage with audiences, to talk about how we're engaging on the subject of disability. To be perfectly honest, the biggest job is internal. We have to make it so that people with disabilities are represented in every design project, in every tender, in every bit of business that Microsoft does, because until we do that, we only give the tools to companies to design technology. We don't deliver the final product more often than not. So I just thought I'd share with you today how we do that in the 2 minutes I have. We describe to our product teams that disability is not a medical health condition. Disability, via the World Health Organization definition, is that it's the technology or the situation that disables us. And when we do that, our design teams really get imaginative. They start to look at people with permanent disabilities, but then also those with temporary disabilities and injuries, and also then start to think about situational disability. And when we deliver great product that has people with disabilities in mind, we end up delivering to a much wider audience than we first thought. And so our role now is to share that information more widely with every customer that we do business with, every private sector company, but also, probably more importantly, every public sector customer and government. So we share our design principles, what we call inclusive design, via a website, www.microsoft.com/inclusive design. And we share the positive benefit of designing for everybody with disability in mind, and the huge cost savings that we can all make when we deliver with disability in mind from the outset. I have to say, part of this is also recognizing the new tools that are available to people. The technology that will help people with disabilities as we move forward is not necessarily the technology we've been used to over the last 10 years, but maybe the next 10 years. And I'm talking about things like artificial intelligence. If artificial intelligence will deliver a free app that allows somebody who's illiterate to read text aloud via their phone, then that benefits everybody. That benefits people who are blind, it benefits people with physical disabilities, but it also benefits people who have, who've just not learnt literacy yet. And these are the sorts of projects that excite us and some of the potential benefits that AI can deliver as we go forward. So let me just quickly tell you about how we're sharing the message and what the local initiative is. We need to make it matter to the people out there selling the products that people with disabilities need to use our products. We have been putting features in for 20 years that help people with disabilities. In fact, I've been showing some people today on our booth those features, things that have been around for an awful long time, but that people didn't know about. The biggest thing that Microsoft can do is make sure that when the government is procuring technology, when anyone is procuring technology, that they're implementing the accessibility standards to buy accessible tech, to make sure that it's one of those things that's on the tick list of importance when we buy our technology. When we do that, everybody takes notice. The person selling the technology takes notice, the person buying the technology takes notice, the But what we then need to do is empower the employees to use the features that have been implemented for them to raise awareness that people with disabilities can be as productive, can be amazing employees, can stay in education when the technology properly represents their needs. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Hector, for sharing with us the initiative undertaken by Microsoft. So my next speaker is Mr. Mohua Paul, and she's a co-founder of Access Bangladesh Foundation. At the age of 12, she developed transverse mellitus and very quickly became paralyzed. So she worked for 35 years in different disability-oriented organizations and has received several awards from government of Bangladesh for her outstanding contribution in the disability development. So my question to you, Mohua, is now we would like to turn our focus to Bangladesh. Mohua, can you please tell us about a specific initiative you have undertaken in your country to build the capacity of individuals most unreached or marginalized about the CRPD? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here to share on how my organization, Access Bangladesh Foundation, contribute to build capacity of unreached people on UNCRPD. Bangladesh government ratified the UNCRPD in 2007. Just after 1 year, we started our organization, Access Bangladesh Foundation, on 4th January in 2008. We are very lucky that we got fund from Disability Right Fund in 2009 to promote UNCRPD in Bangladesh. Now, Access Bangladesh is a leading DPO in Bangladesh in promoting rights of persons with disabilities. We focused to build capacity of unreached group UNCRPD like DPO leaders work in remote area, indigenous people with disability, and persons with disability live in remote area. We build capacity of journalists, union chairman, member, sub-district of government official, and other actors in the community in UNCRPD. We sensitize persons with disability on UNCRPD. We train DPO leaders on CRPD so that they can do advocacy, establish basic human rights like education, employment, health, barrier-free environment of persons with disability in Bangladesh. CRPD has been translated in different languages to reach different indigenous groups. For example, we translated UNCRPD in Chakma language. To make the indigenous people aware about UNCRPD, we made drama titled Shobar Jonno Ek Prithibi, in English, One World for All. We arranged different shows in the community to make mass people, made awareness raising TV advertisement and broadcasted in the government and private TV channel to make mass people aware on CRPD. We arranged TV talk show on UNCRPD implementation. Union is the bottom level administrative structure in Bangladesh, so we orientated union chairman and member on CRPD to ensure economic empowerment of unreached people with disabilities. Sub-district officials have been made aware on CRPD through workshop, seminar, and training. We did advocacy with the government to change our welfare-based disability law into right-based. The name of our law was Bangladesh Person with Disability Welfare Act 2001. We are very happy that we got a new law in 2013 named Rights and Protection of Persons with Disability Act 2013, which has been formulated in line with the UNCRPD. I'm so happy that our organization was actively engaged in the process of drafting and finalizing the law. Access Bangladesh arranged different consultations at local and national level on the draft disability rights law. The Ministry of Social Welfare Disability Lead Ministry in Bangladesh, assigned Access Bangladesh to review the draft National Disability Action Plan. We arranged 3 consultations with local and national level DPOs, NGOs, international NGOs. Finally, we arranged a national consultation with disability focal point of 46 ministries. As an active member of the National UNCRPD Monitoring and Implementation Committee, we are providing input to the government. I would like to sum up that to empower and unleash persons with disabilities, we need to build capacity of all actors in the society on UNCRPD. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohua, for sharing with us all the initiatives you undertook and also the training you give to the local DPOs and other persons with disabilities. So our next speaker is Mr. Michele Falavigna. He studied political science and diplomacy. Michele worked with the United Nations as a humanitarian coordinator in Chad and Niger. He is a specialist of disability inclusion in humanitarian aid and an advisor to the NGO AIFO, the Associazione Italiana di Rafael Follereau. And he's also an expert of capacity building of organizations representing persons with disabilities. So our question to you, Michele, is can you please tell us about your experience with the organization AIFO and training institutional and civil society representatives through the Bridging the Gap 2 project in one country? Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you to the organizer. You mentioned the project Bridging the Gap. There are so many gaps to be bridged. This is a project that is funded by the European Union and is aiming at making development cooperation accessible and inclusive of persons with disabilities. So it is a pilot phase at this point that is implemented in 5 countries in Africa and South America. And personally, with my colleague Giampiero Griffo, which is a well-known personality in the world of disability, we went on a mission to Sudan to conduct a training course for a mixed group of government and DPOs representatives. It was indeed a breakthrough, since for the first time all parties could see and compare each other's point of view and discuss about the progress on the implementation of the CRPD in the open, criticizing each other. It is key to highlight the role of DPOs, that this is not well digested by some governments because of the official role that is given to DPOs and organizations of the civil society by the convention. So a separate session with DPOs was organized specifically on empowerment. Indeed, we found that there is no more powerful communication means than to have a person with disabilities speak about the barriers and the possible way to overcome them. By raising the discourse to the rights approach, the workshop stimulated the participants to an interaction on the changes needed at all levels, from legislation to structures, behaviors, with practical recommendation on the way and means to achieve these goals. We drew 2 lessons from these workshops. The first one, the difference of knowledge between government staff and organizations of the civil society, in particular disabled people organization, was evident that was not at the same level, on the same basis, and the dialogue was difficult. So it was necessary to provide a specific training ahead to disabled people organizations to put them on an equal basis of dialogue with the power structures. The second lesson was that it is important to involve the European Union delegation there, because the goal of the Bridging the Gap program, if it is to define an inclusive model in development cooperation programs, that means to hire persons with disabilities and apply their unique competences in resilience in so many fields. And we should not forget that the European Union is the biggest donor in developing countries. So given the Sudan case, we strongly believe that the approach of bridging the gap has to be expanded to other countries, so that the initial allocation of 700,000 euros per country for 4 years is totally insufficient if the project wants to reach the involvement of DPOs, first as trainees, then as peer counselors, actors of mainstreaming in local development, and above all, experts on resilience in an inclusive society. The work we do with our training is to transfer knowledge directly to DPOs, to be leader in advocacy, since this is the only way to guarantee the sustainability of the Convention. I thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michele, for sharing with us the importance really to bring people on the same level before to start and all the other phases before they became expert and they could give advice on equal base and having meaningful impact. I will propose to go straight away to the questions that the audience have, so in order to have an interactive debate.
How can we make sure that capacity building of national DPOs also improves integration with grassroots DPOs?
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'm coming right away back to you, Michele. From the experience, yeah, you heard? How can grassroots organizations also attend?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nadia, for this question. I don't know whether I will be able to fully answer it. However, from the country we visited, we had a mission specifically focusing on this area. 80% of the population lives in the rural areas. Most of them are invisible. The condition of women is even worse of those of men. I think that the only way of getting the community involved is a classical one that is called rehabilitation, community-based rehabilitation. We exist after 2004 and has been implemented throughout the world. But we will try to add something to it, that is the peer approach. Because at the village level, at community level, when a person with disabilities goes around and discuss with the leaders of the village and discuss with the families, and they see that there is a different model in which someone can live with disabilities and can feel with regard to the society, I think that this is a best example. So community-based is really the way in which we can have persons with disabilities, children with disabilities, emerging from their homes and be included in the society, starting with the schools, profession, and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I will ask also Pratima to give her view on it.
So I would say the national DPOs and the grassroots DPOs has to figure out some of the common issues of persons with disabilities, which equally applies at the grassroots and the national level, and also go through some of the specific issues dealing with the grassroots organization and the challenges they face in their daily lives. And having said this, I would also highlight that the role of the DPOs has to be as a facilitator, as a mediator, as a change agent, so that could bring the perspective of the ground and also motivate people from the ground, rather than being a representative or being in executive positions of the DPOs working at the national level. So this would make a sense working with both the national level and the grassroots level.
Okay,
Thank you.
Maybe, Mohua, do you want to add something?
Already, Fatima, I just people with the rural area and the community, they have a bottom level union parishad. Everywhere the sub districts, they have to be all the time. There to be self-help group to be strong with the education and employment. It is these things. Then they can build confidence, and they can go to the national. The national the linkage have a networking through the all the time. They build up the strongly. They talked about the issue base to the government and the groups. Especially they need the what I'm working in the since many years. Then I found it a digital person are really confidence. People need to touch that. They can do it. They can manage it, and then this way, and then that's why there is need to be education, employment. This it is the needed to be everywhere. They need to be set up the when the what I mean is every committee, there is a government committee, local committee, digital people should be included. Automatically they will go to grassroots to national level. That process need to be at
all levels.
And Fatima already told that I didn't mention it. That's right.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we can go to the second question, please.
Capacity building is more than training. How can donors be persuaded to support a broader range of capacity building initiatives?
Okay, so I will come back to you. Mika, if you can answer this question.
Thank you very much. Indeed, capacity building is more than training. Capacity building arises from all sorts of activities. You can provide training, you can provide policy advice, you can provide grants to fund just the organisational structure of a DPO. One of the things in capacity building, which I personally think is frequently overlooked, is actually meaningfully engaging with DPOs in policy dialogue, in meaningfully engaging with DPOs in how to actually design and implement aid programs. Because by doing this, you are not only enabling your policy and your programs to be more effective at being disability inclusive, but you're also building the capacity of the DPOs to contribute to inclusive development. And so, yes, bottom line, it is more than just training. It's about meaningful engagement.
And do you have developed a system in Australia to monitor the impact of the trainings, to see how capacity building has succeeded?
One of the things that I've noticed is in the program of capacity building that we do for DPOs in country is that once you've actually started engaging with a DPO, a local DPO, on development issues, the dialogue between the donor and the DPO just climbs. It gets more nuanced, more informed as each side begins to understand the other more and is better placed to understand what are the objectives, motives and priorities of each other. Our monitoring and evaluation shows that this is a very slow process. It takes a long time to build the capacity. It takes a long time to build trust between DPOs and between donors. But if you persist and you work on it consistently, recognising that you will not achieve magical results overnight or indeed in a year or two, the long-term benefits for both DPOs and the donors can be quite remarkable.
Okay, thank you. Do you, Hector, want to add something from private perspective?
Yeah, maybe just carry on from your point about the training only goes so far. You've got to be backed up by great culture supporting that training. So at Microsoft, we had examples from the past where we tried to implement accessibility standards and best practice, but it wasn't until the culture of the leadership at Microsoft really said that disability is a big subject for us. That, there was a speech about 2 years ago about the cloud for global good, this idea that the world is in a state of digital transformation, and unless we deliberately include people with disabilities, we're going to repeat the same problems from the past every time we have an industrial revolution. And it took real leadership from the Microsoft leadership team to say, you have permission to invest in disability, regardless of your topic, which then empowered people, employees with disabilities, to come and put themselves forward to lead some of that training, to lead some of those projects, to lead some of the innovation. And that's, I think, where we've seen better results. Yeah.
Any reflection? Yeah, Michele?
Yeah, just I want to add another point. Government need to allocate a budget, how DPO can move their movement, because that is also very important. One thing we cannot do, DPOs knows what to do for disabled people, but so we are seeing is lack of budget, lack of the people mindset. We cannot move it. This is very important to all the country to keep budget for the DPOs.
Okay, thank you. Michele, want to add something?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, capacity building is more than training. I will start indeed with the concept of empowerment, because empowerment means that a person becomes aware that he is a right holder. And as holder of rights, he changes his position in negotiation with the government, in negotiation with the other organizations, in negotiations of facilities like a center where to meet, where to get organized, or all sorts of activities that are the core of an organization. Then I think that if we go down to the road of capacity building, once a person are empowered, then the state has to understand that to build an inclusive society, it cannot do without them.
Yeah.
It cannot.
Yeah.
And that's why should be a win-win situation in which resources and availability and openness of mind is put from both sides. And this can bring us forward.
Okay, thank you. So we go to the next question, please.
Does Microsoft have design tools that are accessible so that people with disabilities themselves have a chance to design products or fully be involved in the design process? Can you give us examples?
It's for me? Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So well, there's a few things here. There's the design of software, but then there's the everyday design of documents and websites, and the authoring piece versus the creation piece. So absolutely, our Visual Studio tools for writing software are accessible via screen readers. All of our products actually have to meet the Section 508 in the States and the EN 301549 accessibility standards, and we report against all of these. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the lived experience is a great product for people to write software or to author. So perhaps the best example I can give you about the way that it's going forward might be in something like Office. Well, there's two examples maybe I give you, if I have permission. The first one is just a bog standard Office, something that most of us use to write our emails or to create our PowerPoints. It's now possible for somebody who's blind or has low vision to put images into their presentations, and artificial intelligence will then design the slide to look as professional as it can possibly be, which is a great equalizer for people who want to present their best selves. So that's one process where we're looking at tools that we didn't have 10 years ago, but framing them around people with disabilities to be productive and to be creative. Another example is Alt-Q, which is the search function, where even if you don't know the product, you can type in your words what you're trying to do, and artificial intelligence will take you to the feature of what you're actually trying to do. So that's that process of designing in increasing amounts of accessibility into the product. The other thing would just be that basic thing of coding, where recognizing that people with disabilities have the best ideas for productivity. Yeah? So somebody who's blind, who needs to be able to read something, looks at artificial intelligence and comes up with a product like Seeing AI, which allows him to take his camera on his phone, point it at some text, and it reads it out to him. Most people wouldn't imagine that that was a use for artificial intelligence, but somebody with a disability will hear that a computer can see text and translate it into voice and say, yeah, I want to make that product do that for me. So there's two angles there. There's the general lived experience, the standard tools becoming increasingly accessible, more accessible, embedding things like AI. But then there's this concept of us getting people into Microsoft, to work at Microsoft, to look at the new tools to create the brilliant products of the future.
Okay, thank you. Maybe can you just clarify how Microsoft is promoting those tools?
Yeah, that's hard work. So accessibility doesn't have its own marketing cost center. Let's just tell you this. Interestingly, we're building momentum. So we've now got it to the stage where our mainstream marketing leads are looking at accessibility and disability and saying, yes, all of our marketing must increasingly represent people with disabilities. It's from there that there's a call to action to the audience to come and find out more. So we have a standalone website, microsoft.com/accessibility, where you can find these tools. But I have to say, and maybe the call out to the audience here, is that the DPOs should be the experts in those tools. And making sure that people unlock the potential that are in the products that they have. It's incredible the amount of schools or universities or government organizations that we go and work with where employees don't know that the tools are built in to allow them to either remain productive or become productive. We have work to do. I'm certainly not here to tell you that we've done a great job at promoting everything we're doing. It's really this audience and why we're here today. We want people to come and try it, test it, and then go out and promote it.
Okay, thank you. I hope that between the audience, a lot of experts will come, that you'll have new partners. So let's go to the next question, please.
Mika, can you tell us the story about the little stuffed animal on the table next to you?
Thank you. I was wondering if anybody was going to ask. Have we got a close-up on the camera? So this is Wagga. Wagga is a wombat. A wombat is an Australian marsupial with very poor eyesight. You could say he's a marsupial with a disability. He's also DFAT's mascot on disability rights, and for the last 2 years or so has been attending international events around the world promoting disability inclusion and disability rights. Because of his advocacy efforts, he holds the honorary rank of ambassador, hence he's known as Wagga the Wombassador. Wagga.
Thank you. Can we have the next question, please?
Pratima, What challenges have you faced in intersectional movement building? What lessons and learning can you share? Any successful strategies that can be scaled up?
So moving with the intersectional challenges that I have highlighted in my presentations earlier. So when you have many identities at a time, I would say it's a power dynamics. It's a power relation. So as soon as you are in many identities, your power decreases and sometimes you are nowhere. So for us, as an Indigenous woman with disabilities, also representing from a marginalized group, what I would like to highlight is the challenges that we face on the ground and the challenges we face at the global level are some differences. Because when we see on the ground, we see there are some specific issues that is very contextual regarding to the national strategies. Maybe it might be a regional strategies also. So in that regard, I would like to highlight that in Nepal, the issue of Indigenous persons with disabilities is still not a human rights issue. Though the concluding observation of the CRPD committee recently in 2018, in February, has given many recommendations on improving the situation of Indigenous persons with disabilities and mainstreaming them. But despite all these kind of efforts and contributions that has come from the grassroots to the national level, there are challenges like the issue of representations, meaningful representations to make the voices of Indigenous persons with disabilities. This is a grassroots and a national context. When it comes to the regional level, we face the challenges that how are we going to include the issue of Indigenous persons with disabilities, either in an Indigenous movement or in a women movement or a disability movement. So the understanding of cultural sensitive approach, the understanding of gender sensitive approach, and the understanding of disability sensitive approach has to be framed in every sectors, and there lies your challenges for us when you see at the regional and at the global level. So one of the strategies that we have really tried to figure out, and we have done at the grassroots level and also coming at the global level advocacy, is we have brought our live experiences, we have brought our voiceless voices on this table, and we are demanding that to ensure our voice, we need to be on the table, and that is by the representation of Indigenous persons with disabilities. It's not only about Indigenous persons with disabilities, it is about the marginalized group within the whole disability framework, like there are developmental disability, there is intellectual disability, psychosocial disabilities, and many has to come out. And for that, we need a collective solidarity. And we are seeking for the collective solidarity with the cross-movement collaboration approach, which I have already mentioned. So despite the challenges, we see that there are areas where we can equally contribute despite the differences, and also trying to figure out the commonalities that we have within the movement. So this would be the strategies that we are applying, and with these strategies, we are also trying to figure out the challenges that we face within the strategies to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Mika want to add something.
Yes, thank you. From a donor perspective, if a donor is seeking to provide funding support to DPOs, it's very easy to fall into the trap of funding those DPOs that are most visible. The most visible DPOs in developing countries tend to be male and urban. And if you are truly trying to address marginalisation and ensuring that you leave no one behind, you do need to reach out to groups that represent other parts of the disability community where that intersectionality occurs. Often those groups are very hard to find, and so therefore it is incumbent upon the donor to actually look harder and take greater risks in providing funding to more marginalised groups within the disability community, those that represent women and girls with disabilities, those that represent Indigenous groups, those that represent the LGBTI community, those that represent people with psychosocial intellectual disabilities. All across the disability movement there is a huge range of diversity, yet many of the DPOs that we first find ourselves dealing with only represent a particular segment of that community.
Thank you. We'll go maybe to the next question, please.
The role of DPOs is crucial to advance the rights of persons with disabilities. How can you ensure European DPOs also play a role in international cooperation, as at the moment they have little capacity to engage?
Okay, maybe I'll give the floor to Michele, as you have a project funded by the European Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. Well, I start from our little Italian, let's say, configuration. In our network, we do have 2 international NGOs. One is specialized on inclusive education. The second one is specialized in capacity building of DPOs. And then we have 2 DPOs. One is the Association of the Italian DPOs, so it's a federation of Italian DPOs. The other one is DPI International. And we work together. So on one side, international NGOs have a little bit more experience in terms of cooperation programming. DPOs, Italian DPOs, they have the person who can actually say whether what is planned to do is right or not, and participate to the action. So we have done a lot. We were very lucky that we have a person that is able to communicate in English and French. So, and so we do joint mission, NGOs and DPO together in humanitarian situations. I mean Gaza, I mean Jordan, the border of Jordan. So many situations. And there you can see that even in this situation, to have a person with disabilities that communicate peer-to-peer to others, it is an example that is absolutely innovative. It's a revolution, cultural revolution for the people there. They can see that themselves they can do something much more productive than stay there and expect to be helped. And they acquire an active role in being sure that people in the same condition get organized and claim their rights to participate in the decision, and claim the rights to negotiate on the conditions regarding environment, regarding access to school, access to health, access to basic rights, which sometimes are denied. And I would make a plea to all organizations that are here and that are listening and are playing a great role in humanitarian situation. I would make a plea to hire more people with disabilities in their program, because there is a much need of them, of their competence.
Then I have just a small question about, I know that Italy has a special legislation, Article 32. Does the local DPUs receive any funding to be able to get engaged? Because if they don't have funding, even for their own lobby work, it's very difficult then to make the right balance on how they can proceed. But if there is a special budget allocated to realize that must facilitate and can be duplicated maybe by other countries.
Yes, I'm not a specialist of the matter, but I think that there is a public subsidies for federations and associations of persons with disabilities and all organizations that do basically public services.
Okay, thank you. From the other perspective, maybe from the South, how is it going on to be involved in the international development cooperation? Any opportunities, any partnerships?
For us is working in the grassroots level. This is one of the challenges that we are facing. As Mika was telling about how to reach to the grassroots level organizations, and do they have the capacity to receive the fund? For if you look from an indigenous persons with disabilities, DPOs, we don't have that because we are a loose network. In my country, I'm only the one who can speak Nepal English language because it's not my language. So it's my third language that I'm speaking. And I have to be the voice of 1.3 million indigenous persons with disabilities in Nepal. So we are a national-based organizations. Though we are a national-based organizations that was established since 2008, but there is still a huge, huge reluctancy to fund for indigenous persons with disabilities organizations. And when you talk and imagine about the grassroots level organization, who even cannot say their experiences, their challenges, why they need to be there, isn't it? Who even are not aware what CRPD mean for them. So you can imagine the fund and other stuff. So it's very, very challenging. And the idea of representation that which I was talking about earlier is also to bring those challenges on this forum, to highlight the situation, to see how can we reach to the most marginalized group, to see within us who is not in this room, who is left behind. So for us, we are really looking for a paradigm shift, and we want to break the silos within the disability movement, and that has to be begun by us. That has to be begun by persons with disabilities and the DPOs. Until and unless we are not able to do that, we can't imagine a disability-sensitive approach. We can't imagine no one leaving behind, or we can't imagine an inclusive world where everybody fits. So we have to change that. So we have to look within us, and we have to look beyond us. So by saying that, I'm trying to highlight some of the issues that we have within us, and we have to see the issue of disability not as an issue of persons with disability, because it is a collective issue, it is a social issue, it is our issue. So until and unless we realize this in our mentality, being a person with disabilities or not being a person with disabilities, that is not going to change. So we have to change ourselves first. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mohua, you want to add the perspective?
I want to add with Fatima, just donors have to be change their mind. They are thinking we are very small, we don't have capacity. Because of they also have to trust also to giving the just already grant to the DPOs. And then they can build, then they can work, show their work. This is also all the time, it is also a challenge for us because DPOs are very poor. That's why people are using them, other organizations using them for just, what is it I'm just telling in my life, just that we are using as a DPOs, other than this is other organizational work, they are working through the DPOs. Why not donors is funding to direct to the DPOs? So it is very important to giving fund to the DPOs. Then DPO will be more strong and donor can trust, yes, they can. But we need, just as a DPO, I'm talking, we needed the more capacity building. We know that because we didn't get chance. Okay. We needed the chance to work for that. Okay. As a donor had to be touched them, and they have to change their mind also.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we can go for last question before we wrap up.
How do we ensure that when DPOs have had capacity building training, its impact continues after the training?
Very challenging question.
Yes.
Anybody want to volunteer to give a response? Maybe Michele?
I can maybe give an analogy as to because we all know whenever we do any training, like how does it live on? And I have to say, the more that we record, the more that we publish, the more that we're transparent with information, and that's how we make it live on. Because so often somebody owns this project in any topic, it lives with them, it stays with them, and then they retain ownership. We're moving now in enterprise and in private business now to a culture of complete transparency on information, so that anybody can go into anybody else's meeting through video, anybody can go in and see the document that somebody else is working on. It's then that we find that somebody else can pick this work up and get enthused by it and move further without having had to go on the original course.
Okay, thank you. Michele?
Yes, I was just... it came to mind, a conversation I had with the representative of Niger, of a DPO from Niger, that he said, well, the government has sent his report, official report, initial report to the committee. We have prepared an alternative report. We have a continued dialogue. Now, they accepted to include us when they are preparing laws, basically, to be sure that laws are going to be inclusive. They consult with the Federation of Organization of Disabled People in Niger. I think that once you have the capacity and you are inserted into a mechanism of dialogue, and you see that you have a specific role as the one that the convention gives to civil society, and then the one is recognized by the government, and the one is recognized also by international cooperation actor, it's not that you drop the ball right there. It's the first time that you really see that you can have an influence on what is decided. Nothing about us without us becomes real. So I do not see really the possibility that just after capacity building and a few training, people disappear. I think that I'm rather optimistic on the sense of responsibility that the movement has with regard to the role that it is given to him by society.
Okay, thank you. Last round for the other speakers. Yeah. You want to add something, Hector? You want to add something?
I didn't get the question. I didn't understand the question, in fact.
It's about when people get a training, how they can follow up about the capacity building, how effective it was, what was the impact, and how can we ensure that it helps the implementation of the CRPD also. After receiving trainings. Because most of the time after the trainings, there is no following up.
I can see we've got about half a minute, so I will actually say something.
Yes,
just to get the last word in. With any training, training becomes more effective if after you've been trained, you actually apply it. From my perspective as a donor representative, if we actually invest in capacity building of DPOs, What we need to do afterwards is then continue to engage with the DPOs so that they can apply what they have learnt to their benefit and to our benefit. That is the most effective way of embedding it, is you actually start applying it once you've actually provided it.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
One thing in Bangladesh we are doing, the after capacity building, we're just trying to find a job for the how the capacity making. Then we have the business people association and other civil societies. Then we are forcing them sometime to take them after using their capacity. Then to see, we are telling them, keeping them and see it how they are showing. And people mindset is again, I'm talking, they cannot do it, we cannot do it. That's why if we do giving the job and other way, we can use their after training, we can manage it that.
Okay, thank you very much.
We are having the job fair, we are having sometime we are just lobbying with the factory and others, then yes, he can do it. You can test it at least 6 months after, and then close follow-up, then they can use their capacity properly.
Okay. Well, thank you. Do you want to add something, Pratima?
Yeah,
Shortly, please.
just to add one point, that for me, capacity building is also amplifying the voices, because you get engaged with so many things at a time. For example, if a person with disabilities is provided a training on CRPD, it is not only focused with the CRPD, but as soon as he or she learns about CRPD, there are also other things like you have informations, you have data collections going around with those training, isn't it? You are trying to figure out who are the potential person who is supposed to take the training. So by doing this, we also realize that we are engaging persons with disabilities. So to engage persons with disabilities, no matter it is a capacity building or empowering, is important for me. And that has to be in a continuous process if we are really thinking that persons with disabilities' rights should be ensured at all levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We heard a lot of good recommendations and with some good examples and practices that I hope that in the future we could multiply it. We also hear that peer support is something very, very important to empower DPOs at grassroots level to believe in themselves, but also to empower them to go further and do lobby work. Also the involvement of persons with disability themselves, a big NGO. So those need to be the trainers for the future trainers. In order to make it more effectiveness, we heard also that financing DPOs in order to make them able to attend big meetings and also to have the right information to enable them to have a meaningful involvement that has really impact. And also the following up is something very important. So it's very important also to involve them in the monitoring mechanism from the beginning until the end, until the evaluation, reporting, and starting new projects. So I thank you all for your attention. Thank you for the panelists for being here. Thank the audience for listening to us and for all the questions. But before we close, we'll ask everybody please to be back here around 4:30 after the coffee break. And also a big thanks to the staff behind the questions, the interpreters, and all those who helped behind the curtains. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, there will now be a short break. The next session will begin at 4:30. Thank you.